So definitely please get involved with that. And again, thank you so much for your time. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Reese, and I'm not talking about that old man sitting there. Although this is his son, though.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Wilson, Cynthia, and Pastor Robinson for even allowing me to come here to speak today. I'll be honest with you. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to write today about a particular topic, and as I'm putting together my notes, I discovered I was putting together a speech, and then the mayor came up here, and I just deleted my whole thing. So what I did was I took some key notes from what I think is important that I want to make everybody aware of today. I was also struggling with how I'm going to present this without being too raw. But I think it's time to kind of be raw. And so I'll just be honest with you and upfront. This is about human trafficking. Okay. Too many times I've been dealing in this area. Just a little bit about myself. I'm, military veteran. I was a military police officer. I delved into this part of criminal justice back in 2002. So I've been dealing with this particular subject a long time. I don't talk about it a lot. A lot of times it's for the sake of my own family and for the sake of the victims. So I work with professionals and other agencies where we kind of try to keep that type of information anonymous. So I just don't go out, doing a bunch of speeches and stuff. A lot of times, my day covers, I'm an insurance agent, which I actually do. But when there's call to action for a victim, I'm working with specific people. The rawness of human trafficking here today has been going on for a long time. Missouri has always ranked anywhere in the top 20 in the United States. Unfortunately, recently I believe Missouri's like number 9 right now in the United States. Part of that reasoning is because Missouri is square in the middle of the United States. It's such a transient state. You have, 2 major highways, I-70 and I-40. Part of the highways being owned by the mafia. Now it's owned by the cartel. St. Louis, Columbia, Springfield, Kansas City are major hubs in Missouri. Some of the things that I've noticed, especially in a lot of suburban areas, people are just unaware that this is actually going on. A few years ago, we had an incident up at S&T where students were being followed by traffickers that came down from St. Louis and videotaped their routine, going to class, going to their apartments, and getting their routine. During that time, I was actually helping a nonprofit search for a victim that was taken out of St. Peters, Missouri, and trafficked by the Bloods in St. Louis. And it's a white woman, and they call her the Walking Diamond in an all-black neighborhood ran by the Bloods. It was a neighborhood the police don't typically go into unless they absolutely have to, and they usually wait till all the shootings done. That's the type of neighborhood she was in. When they discovered when the family discovered that she was gone, she was actually going out with her boyfriend. They were just going out for a couple of drinks. She had no idea that he was an actual trafficker. He was a good-looking guy, playing cover. We call those guys Romeo players. And he dated her for about 6 months. And that's the thing about these traffickers; they're very patient. And they use that to do intel gathering. Brought him over to her parents' house, where her 5-year-old daughter lives with her. She lives with her parents, so now this guy knows exactly where her family lives. Knows what her daughter looks like. same come back. I never found out until recently actually what happened. I was just called by a nonprofit and asked if I could help. So I met up with the representative for the nonprofit, met up with the family, and when they told me who the guy was, I did a quick background check on him, started looking into social media. He's an absolute blood. He has been for a long time. And I didn't want to tell the family that their daughter isn't coming back. She's going to end up dead. It's what's going to end up happening. But it was her 5-year-old daughter that I've never met before, came walking out of her room, walks up to me and wraps her arms around me and says, "Are you the man that's going to save my mom?" And that's when I knew God called me. And because I just couldn't, deal with the fact that what if this was my child? And so I knew it was a calling that day for me to be there. So I started working with a nonprofit to try to locate this woman who I've never met. And we were actually doing a documentary one day and filming, and our 18-year-old camera girl, when we were out looking for this woman, spotted her down the street. She was like, "That's her right there." So we pull up to her, and she comes up to the car, and when she realized that we were there to rescue her out of that situation, she began to cry and said that she was being watched. And so I just happened to look behind her. It was just guys just lined up on the porch, just watching her, all guns. And I said, "Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to come back for you. I'm going to drop them off. I'm going to come and pick you up. You see my car again." I went back, she was gone. They sold her to traffickers in Atlanta, Georgia. And so we got Homeland Security involved. They located her in Atlanta at a Super 8 hotel. They kept moving her around. But they located her. They went in with 10 heavily armed federal agents. Got her, but she wouldn't leave. And this is something that victims go through. Because they threatened to kill her family because she left, she stayed. And there was nothing that Homeland could do about it because she's an adult. Now, if she was a child, they'd be able to take her. But because she's an adult, it makes it that much more complicated because a lot of them are already spiritually, mentally, and emotionally broken. A lot of times they're ashamed to even go back, or they fear that their families will receive some type of repercussion if they leave. So that was a really difficult situation. And, but I didn't stop. I kept getting with the church that was involved in St. Louis and the pastor there. I really didn't know, what I was doing, because it's different when you're in the military doing something like that. I was on a task force in DC. But when you're doing this as a civilian, just an individual person, just as a citizen, it's just different. You don't have the type of resources, you don't have the type of manpower, but I kept going because I just kept telling myself that if this was my child, or my mom, my dad, or my brother, for me it'd be a scorched earth. And so I was trying to instill in a lot of parents while I was doing this, what would you do? I've gotten with law enforcement agencies. I've gotten with the chief of staff of the Post a few years ago. And I asked them, I said, what's Fort Lynnwood's protocol in response to a traffic victim that's military personnel or the dependent of the military personnel? You know what he told me? He said, won't happen. I said, well, that's interesting because just a month ago, one of my friends who's a Navy sailor here, her daughter was almost trafficked. What would Fort Lynnwood have done? What would the military have done? And I just, in being an officer, I just have never been addressed with that question before, like, what do we do for our service members and their families? And I thought that was a problem, that we didn't have a plan for that, because what happens is when a victim is taken, a lot of times, is an organization of people getting that victim out of the county. So the first thing we initially do is call 911 or local law enforcement. But by the time they respond, they're already out of the county. So your sheriff's department can't go out of the county. So now we're having to rely on highway patrol or state patrol to But by that time, they've already switched vehicles maybe 2 or 3 times and probably switched directions. And then 2-3 hours later, they're out of the state. So it's like, what do we do? Sure, you could call the FBI, but they're so busy with other high-profile stuff, domestic terrorism, things like that, you know, your child may not be on the priority list. Now, specifically talking about children's. You know, unless you're like the governor's kid or something like that, they're not going to, you know, Homeland Security, same thing. So, I just really thought that this was a problem that the communities really need to be aware of, and that communities really need to come together as a force to be reckoned with these traffickers, because a lot of these people are dealing with, you know, just some demonic vices. This is spiritual warfare.
Yes.
That was one thing that I discovered. This is absolute spiritual warfare. This is all demonic. And when I was talking with the pastor before I was going out with my victim advocate one day, he prayed for all of us. There was a circle of us. I'll never forget this. He prayed for each and every one of us, but then he skips me, and he goes on to the next person. So I'm just like, well, you know, he didn't pray for me at all. Yeah, so I was feeling left out, and then when he got to the end, he did pray for me. And as he was praying for me, he prayed a specific prayer, and I will tell you, I've always been a man of God, but I wasn't touched by God until that night. And I physically felt something wrapping something over me. It was all fire. To the point where I opened my eyes, I'm looking around like, what in the world is going on? And it was God dressing me in his armor. And I'll never forget that. The Lord is real. I felt and I knew the pastor knew it. And when the prayer was done, I was literally sweating. And I went out that night, and that night it just happened to rain. And the Lord not only showed one rainbow, he showed 2 rainbows. It's a double rainbow. And me and my victim advocate, that's what both of us. You know, and so we just, that's what somebody mentioned hope earlier. It gave us so much hope that, you know, we're in this with the Lord, and he has us under his protection. We're going to find this woman. And then one day, I get a phone call. I was actually headed to an insurance appointment with a client, and my victim advocate calls me and says, hey, we just got a call from her. She's in Atlanta still. Her pimp is gone for the day. He's not getting back to the morning. This is her only window to get out. She called her sister and asked, can somebody come and rescue her? I got geared up, put on my, you know, black leather, you know, vest, and got my shotgun and my pistol. And I drove to Atlanta. My family didn't even know I was out of state. My friends didn't even know I was out of state. And the reason for that is if they knew, I'll be more distracted with them being worried about what was going to, you know, go down than me staying focused. And we ended up rescuing her. And when we got done, her sister asked me if I wanted to meet her. And I was actually kind of terrified. And I don't know why, but I got up and met her, and she hugged me, and then she just looked at me and just starts just rubbing my face, and she says, you know, I've seen you before. I said, yeah, remember that time almost a year and a half ago when you came up to my car? She was like, no, I've seen you many times before. I was like, what? She was like, yeah, were you looking for me this whole time? I said, yeah, I wasn't going to stop. She said, I had no idea. I have hope looking for you.
Oh, wow.
So I think about that, and she was 28 years old. When I think about young folks, like I'm looking at these 2 kids right there, that little boy right there. Like, what do we do as a community for somebody that young? I've dealt with organizations, you know, where we've taken down, you know, pornographic sites. We're fighting the dark web. And there are men that pay to see young folks being violent. What do we do about that as a community? And so I just feel in my heart like, you know, this is something that we have to combat. Missouri, what is Missouri doing? Missouri has put forth different bills and different initiatives and things like that, but it's not enough. You know, they started with certain things like putting posters in bars and stuff like that with different information resources and, you know, things like that. They've got a traffickers fund where when these traffickers get arrested, you know, there's money there. You know, it goes through that Missouri State Fund for victims and resources and things like that. But after kind of seeing what I've seen and knowing now that the biggest threat right now is AI, these traffickers are using AI. And you know, not to insult anyone, but we got so many young ladies so ignorant to the way the world works and that there are dragons in this world that need to be slain. And they don't realize how dangerous it is. We got young women thinking they're going on dating sites that are generated by traffickers that are through AI, that they think they're meeting up with, you know, somebody decent. That's what we're fighting now. So my goal, not to take up too much time, but I get so passionate about this because I get so concerned with the people I love, and there are people out there that we don't even know, that don't even know they have a hope, and they don't. You know, and that's what just kind of, just you know, I hold dear to my heart, but we need a call to action as a community. One of the things that I'm trying to do right now, I started going back to school to get my doctorate in Homeland Security. And I'm halfway through, so, you know, keep praying for me on that. One of the things I want to do here in Missouri, and it can start right here in this county, is I want to start the first community QRF. When I'm looking at all these people in this room today that can be part of this QRF, and we have a victim here in our community, we come together as a quick reaction force to go and rescue that victim. I'm trying to put together a piece of legislation to present to representatives that puts our QRF in a status of arrest authority, to be deputized by the sheriff's departments, to go through law enforcement training that gives them the training and education on how to address these type of situations, because a lot of times these trafficking situations come from domestic violence situations, come from low income situations, come from runaway situations. And so we need to be trained up on that. But I'm looking to put together a QRF. I'm looking to educate students in schools, family members, getting the churches involved to take lead into slaying these dragons, because it is spiritual warfare, and to build safe houses here in Pulaski County that we can utilize for these victims. That's what I'm looking to do in our call to action. I was going through my speech, and I was pulling out things from Dr. Martin Luther King, which, you know, Mayor already covered a lot of that. But one of the things that I discovered from a lot of his speeches, he always talked about freedom, equality, and justice. And those are three things that get robbed from victims every single day. And that's what I'm fighting for. And in my pursuit in this, I'll leave you with this. I'm constantly reminded of when the Lord talks about Matthew 18:10. See that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you, there are angels in heaven see the face of my Father in heaven. And that's my mindset. And so coming together as a community, we send that messages to these traffickers, you know, that these little ones, angels, see the face of the Father. And that's what they should be reminded of. But I just wanted to end it with that, you know, that's what's going on. You know, it is happening in our backyard right here. And I'll just share one more thing. Recently, it happened to a friend of mine's 14-year-old daughter right here. She's an officer of the court here in Pulaski County. Her daughter was trafficked by another child who was trafficked. And that's the thing. So parents have got to be aware of who your children are hanging out with, who their friends are. I remember a time growing up, you know, when my dad was in Korea, my mom was teaching all the time. The neighborhood we lived in, all the parents were everybody's parents. And we just really need to kind of get back to that. thank you. Sorry for taking up so much time, but that's what I wanted to share with you today.
And one reason why, it was funny because I've been knowing him since he's been, nobody's kid to me, in school and everything, but, I really met him at, a bit that you gave. When you met with that entrepreneur. And we didn't know what's going on in the community, because we get a wealth of information. And another thing too that came to me was, because I subbed at the school, and usually I'm at the high school, but this is at the middle school too.